Fairly abrupt and unexpected news was released about one of the top 10 MMOs. This game is highly regarded by its player base and often suggested in a myriad of top MMOs to play in X year videos and blog posts. It got news of a potential successor. But before we talk about the future, we have to talk about the past. For ArenaNet, the past starts in 2005 with the release of Guild Wars, which was retroactively titled Guild Wars Prophecies, the start of the franchise and predecessor to the game we all know now, Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars had a total of 2 successful expansions to the primary game, and then a final expansion to Guild Wars Prophecies, known as Eye of the North, only a handful of years later in August of 2007. The thing is, in March of 2007, Guild Wars 2 was announced, and the subsequent updates served to set up the future of the franchise. While the game was moderately popular and financially successful, as it was one of the few games that didn't launch with an in-game cash shop, which really at that point hadn't become a norm for the industry, despite that they were moving on to Guild Wars 2 if the player base wanted it or not. And largely the player base did. Some moved on from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2, some moved on to New World or WoW or Final Fantasy before A Realm Reborn, Diablo 3, or any other game that was released at the time. While Guild Wars 1 has not seen many updates or any balance changes for decades, the game still exists in a playable state with a diehard community that are in love with that style of game. I did play through and completed God Walking Amongst Mere Mortals shortly before EOD was actually released, which was only a couple of years ago, and the game can very much be played with henchmen and heroes and enjoyed as an RPG, even if the community is far from what it was during its golden age. Guild Wars 2 is the game we all know and love. I have about equal time played between the two games and only started making content for Guild Wars 2 a few months ago, largely to share my knowledge and thoughts with the community. But Guild Wars 2 was built on top of Guild Wars 1's original proprietary game engine, which was modified heavily to support Guild Wars 2's updated movement. The game engine, however, is essentially tools that the game developers have to use to create new content for the game. If you use an older toolbox, you have to come up with more novel ways to achieve what you want. And the truth is, Guild Wars 2 is an old game, with over a decade of support and development, with the average turnover of key developers at the studio being 2 to 3 years. In reality, we are on our 4th or 5th person working on the code written and modified by somebody over a decade ago. While the game's fundamentals are still strong with reasonable pricing model, a straightforward gear and leveling system, interesting class mechanics, and a unique environment, there are distinct problems that a game this age, developed fundamentally decades ago, faces. Things like buggy UIs, cluttered currencies, cluttered UIs like the achievements panel, hard to manage queuing systems like World vs. World, and the lack of in-game tutorials. The list can go on, and some problems are more invasive than others, and most players would agree that the game is great, but it's not without its flaws. The developers do their best to release bug-free content and listen to their player base for the most part, but any players who have been around a while have seen through the corporate promises for a while now, and all good things must come to an end. So with that, let's take a look at the possibilities of the future. What we know is that there was a shareholder meeting which basically leaked the development of Guild Wars 3.
I'm here to tell you right now,
I'm buying it. And if this is just a leaked rumor or a mistranslation, it is at some point an inevitability. Guild Wars 2's engine with its current DX11 upgrades and processing changes are great for the game. However, the difference between a modified proprietary engine from 2008 or before, an Unreal Engine 5, or a modern game engine is absolutely insane. People have made and released games and demos on Unreal Engine that look basically like real life. Ultimately, Guild Wars 2 and Guild Wars 3 can also exist simultaneously, similar to Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. However, I would almost prefer a full-bore Guild Wars 3 development, where they take lessons learned from Guild Wars 2 and start the groundwork from there. Guild Wars 2 from launch and Guild Wars 2 in present day are entirely different games. The difference is extremely noticeable, and incorporating the best ideas on day one while being able to build the UI, achievement system, and problematic game mechanics like boons from the ground up instead of having to deal with decades of content to balance around would make for an interesting final product. Additionally, to add to the theory that there is in fact a Guild Wars 3, there were postings about an undisclosed Unreal Engine project in the works by ArenaNet. Though this is still unconfirmed, it would be interesting to see some of the concepts that Guild Wars 2 is known for displayed on a modern game engine. Imagine a game with BDO level beauty and better systems with no pay to win scheme. And before I close out this video, I want to say that nothing lasts forever. The times that I've spent in Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 are great, and I fully intend on purchasing Guild Wars 2's mini expansions as well as whatever other games come out in the future. A successor is ultimately inevitable, and I would much prefer the studio have a project like this 5, 6, 7 years down the road in the works than a slow fading death of a great game and great franchise to more modern games. We all have games that we know that have just lost popularity and slowly faded into irrelevance, and we don't want that for this franchise. Just some food for thought while I was browsing through all the recent news. Like always, thank you to all my subscribers, and if you like the video, please consider dropping a like, a comment on what you think about this news, and if you dig the video, please consider subscribing. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.